Hello, this is Dr. Hollisa Alewine. Welcome back to our study in Workbook 2 of the Creation Gospel, which is the 7 abominations of the wicked lamp. We've laid a lot of groundwork up to this point. We've discussed the wicked lamp and what is happening when we open up those 7 seals. We've led preparation groundwork where we talk about the garments. How do we prepare our garments in order to be prepared for the opening of the 7 seals? And so now we're going to open up that seal. We're going to look at that first seal, or the Aleph Seal. And for those of you who haven't completed Workbook 1, it might be a little bit difficult to grasp at first. And my recommendation is go back to Workbook 1 if you can. Try to work through Workbook 1. Because if you learn those patterns of the 7s, then the information we're adding and then the information we're building on with that pattern of the 7s, it'll make a whole lot more sense to you. Because in Workbook 1, what we do is we look at the patterns of the 7 days of creation. Then we overlay that with the 7 spirits of Adonai, as they're listed in Isaiah. Then we go back and we overlay the 7 feasts of Adonai so that you can see that the themes are very consistent with that pattern of 7. And then finally, we take the 7 assemblies of Revelation as just great preparation work for what we're doing here in Workbook 2. And we overlay that, and in that, you can also see the pattern of the feasts, which really are the 7 assemblies of Revelation. So, let's get this seal open. In Revelation 6:1, it says, "Then I saw when the Lamb broke one of the 7 seals, and I heard one of the 4 living creatures saying as with a voice of thunder, 'Come.' I looked, and behold, a white horse, and he who sat on it had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he went out conquering and to conquer." So this describes what happens with the opening of the very first seal. A seal that we're going to say is like the first day of creation. A seal that's going to be like the Feast of Passover. A seal that's going to have the characteristics of the spirit of wisdom. And in fact, if we go back to our paradigm that we learned where the 7 seals can correspond to the first 7 letters of the Aleph Beit, then the opening of this seal with the white horse is going to correspond to the Hebrew letter Aleph. Aleph. And there's lots of things to know about the letter Aleph that are going to help you see the prophetic understanding of why it's associated with the spirit of wisdom. We're going to go back into the book of Proverbs. It's going to help us to decode that. But before we advance on into explaining what's happening here, I want to clarify something for you. We know that we're looking at 7 seals, but the text says there's a voice of the 4 living creatures. We learn about the 4 living creatures in the book of Ezekiel. And the question here is, especially if we've not completed Workbook 1, our question might be, well, if there's 4 living creatures, why is it positioned with 7 seals? Why aren't there 7 creatures, or why aren't there 4 seals? Well, there kind of are. There's a pattern to be learned here, and again, it's called a chiasm. You'll learn about chiasms in Workbook 1. But to demonstrate just very briefly how a chiasm works, if you look at this menorah here, it looks as though there are 4 branches to the menorah. But if we open the menorah up, we can see that there are actually 7. And that's the pattern of a chiasm. The axis, it's going to be the essence of everything, but the fact that there is an axis and that we have mirror concepts, that's going to tell you that it can also function, again, like the chiasm, and in that case, 4 is 4. I mean, it really is 4, but if we go ahead and open up the mirror of the chiasm, then we can say 4 is also 7. I'm looking around you here at this menorah. 7 is 4, 4 is 7. We call that an equivalency of expression. We can use the example of the creation days. We have 7 specific days of creation. But we know that the 4th day of creation was really the essence of all 7 days. Because remember, this menorah was one branch, one pillar, one piece of gold. Out of this one piece, this would have been what they started with, they would hammer out, literally hammer out, the other 6 branches. So everything was contained originally within this piece. This was originally this. This was 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 this. These things here are not separate from this. They're merely branches, manifestations, specific manifestations of this larger thing. Just like if we look at it as the 7 spirits of Adonai, you would have started with Ruach Adonai, the Spirit of the Lord, what we say is the Holy Spirit. But then we find out that they can be, I don't want to say sent on specific missions like an angel, but they can have specific roles within this great thing called the Holy Spirit. It can manifest itself as wisdom or chokhmah. It can manifest itself as understanding or bina. It can manifest itself as etzah, counsel, gvura, power, da'at, knowledge, or reverence, the Yirat Adonai. And so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. When I get to 7, I'm done. 7's the perfect number. It's completed. Everything's done. Everything is finished. It is finished. And it's very good. So what's the difference between what I started with, the original piece of gold, and what I ended up with, which was the fullness of how you could manifest the Holy Spirit, the completion of the work of the Holy Spirit. Well, each of them has a little bit different essence or message, but when you look at it, it really is the same message. So it's equivalent, even though not identical. That's why we call it an equivalency of expression. Not identical, but they share something in common. Each of these would represent the wholeness of the menorah. This is what we started with, and this is what completed it, even though it was complete even when it was here. Now, that's usually pretty mind-blowing, but I think with this visual, it helps you to see how that works. It helps you, if you're one of those visual learners, this is a great tool. And so when I close this back, yes, we're going to read through 7 seals. But at the beginning, we're told that the voice that's accompanying the opening of these 7 seals is coming from 4 living creatures. And we know that these do represent the Spirit of Adonai as well when we read the book of Ezekiel. So 4 can be equivalent to 7, and 7 can be equivalent to 4. And once you know that pattern, you'll start to recognize it in other places. But I thought that might help you a little bit. I know it helps me. I love that visual because I don't have to try to form it in my mind's eye. I can just put my hands on it and practice with it. And it's easier to remember that way. So this white horse rides out, and the white horse is going to have a specific mission. In fact, I'm going to show it to you on here, and then there will be a motion graphic that you can look at afterward that will help you to see the cumulative effect of these 4 horses, and you can see how you only do need 4 horses to accomplish the mission of the opening of the 7 seals. Because again, if I have 4 horses, the white one is just gone out with the opening of the first seal. So I'm going to have a white horse, I'm going to have a red horse, I'm going to have a black horse, and then right here I'm going to have the pale horse. And in Hebrew it's actually it's a pale yellowish green, and the prophets add another description to it. They call it dappled. In English we would say dappled. It literally looks like it's been struck by hail, which makes us think of, you know, what we just read about the storehouses of hail that he's reserved for the day of judgment. Well, when this pale horse rides out, the literal description of him in the prophets is that he's barod. Barod refers to hail. You've probably heard that word before when you did a Passover Seder, because there's a place in the Passover Seder where you take your finger and you dip it in the wine, and as somebody calls out each plague, you'll flick that little drop of wine into your plate just to help you remember the hail, the barod. And so this horse here is not just pale yellowish color, yiracon, and we'll get into how leprosy factors into this and why there's such complicated rules of leprosy. It helps you understand what these horses are doing. That yellowish green color of this pale horse is going to correspond to a color of leprosy in a specific place. So he's also dappled. He also looks like he's been hit with hail. And if you know what a dappled horse looks like, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's just a pattern in the hair of the animal. Very attractive, you know, in most cases. How it would look as yellowish green, I don't know exactly how that would look. But if you're not sure what that looks like, you can just Google that, and it'll bring up a picture there for you of a dappled horse, so you get a better idea than just reading a pale horse or an ashen horse. He'll be a kind of a grayish color with the dapples, or we might say the hail damage on him. So we've got these 4 horses. And you say, but there's 7 seals. Where are the other 3 horses? Well, they're where I just showed you. You don't need more than 4 horses to deal with the opening of the 7 seals, because as this white horse rides out, what you realize is, remember, this is going to be connected. When you studied the menorah, you saw that these 2 branches are going to have the same origin. They're beaten out of the same blossom, we might say, on the menorah. So these are really twins right here. And if you see the full menorah, and you will see that on the graphic, you'll see how this is just half the picture of the menorah. The menorah's full picture really is the fullness of the bow. It would circle around like that. So this white horse, you can associate him with the opening of the first seal, but you can also associate him with the opening of the 7th seal. In the same way here, if you associate the red horse with the opening of the 2nd seal, you can also associate his pattern or his path as remaining right there. And so he can also do the work that is required here of the 6th seal. Say that 3 times real fast. The 3rd horse, the black horse, same thing. He'll follow this path, and he can also execute the commandments there of the 5th seal. And then this horse, we see him as the origin. You say, where did the white horse, the red horse, and the black horse, where did they come from? They all came from the pale horse, because he's in the middle. He's the axis. And everything that we see here is beaten out of the pale horse. And remember, he's death. And it says Hades follows after him, which makes, in our last lesson, those words of Job even more meaningful, where it talks about the gates of death. Have you seen the gates of death? Well, you will, is the message. And you can see this pale horse coming out of the gates of death. And all the things that come with these other horses really originate in death. It's the opposite of life. And so he's executing death upon the earth. That death can manifest in this white horse, in a conquering pattern. And when we get into the altar judgments, the 4 altar judgments, you'll also see that pattern here. If the red horse is going out bringing the sword, then he came from death. If the black horse comes out bringing famine, then he came from death, because that was its origin. And so as you look at the motion graphic, then you will see more actively the pattern and the path of these horses, and you will see how they overlay with what you learned in Workbook 1. You will see there the 7 spirits of Adonai and how they worked in the rivers of Eden. And so as these 4 horses go out, it'll just give you a nice visual along with the pattern that you already have. And what I love about the graphic is that it has sound, and it shows you as these things go out, as the wild beasts of the earth go out to conquer, as the sword goes out, as the famine goes out, as death goes out. There is a noise associated with each one. And the noises just continue. It's not that the white horse rides out and then he's done and we say, you know, we endured the white horse, it's all over now. That's not the way it works. The white horse keeps running. And then the red horse is released. He brings the sword. We say, oh, it's just a sword. If we can avoid the sword, everything will be great. No, because remember, the white horse is still running. It's one Holy Spirit when we look at this menorah. And so it's not like you can break this branch off and have it be something completely separate. This branch will always be part of the whole. So once these horses are sent out running with the pestilence, with the sword, with the famine, what we're going to see is just a gradual building of confusion. It's going to build, it's going to build, it's going to build, and it's not as though one's going to be done and the next one starts. It's going to be a continuous building, not just of the plagues that come out of this, but of all the confusion that goes with it, because see, that's part of the judgment. Remember, he says, I'll blind them. They're not going to be able to see the light. If you can't see the light of the Torah, if you can't see the lamp of the commandments, then all you will continue to see is the darkness. And those noises build, and you'll realize once the whole 7 of the menorah, of the bow, remember the menorah, if we look at it halved, it does look like a bow. You can even see that it's strung with an arrow. It becomes judgment. We tend to think of a rainbow like this. Well, that's your heavenly view. That's the beautiful view, and he gives us a glimpse when we see a rainbow in the sky. We see a promise that we will not be subjected to a judgment of water again. But when we see the bow is picked up, that suggests to us that the bow's not just sitting here like this, withholding judgments from us. Instead, the rider of this white horse has picked up this protection. He has strung the bow with the judgments, and he is about to go forth in the earth, and that which was a promise of protection to all mankind, we might want to reconsider whether we have trampled underfoot the blood of Messiah. Because The judgments, remember, are for the wicked. The wrath of the Lamb is for the wicked. Is the dragon working at exactly the same time? Yes. But remember, it's a choice. Which wrath do you want to endure? The wrath of a dragon who's defeated already. All he can do is trouble you until your physical body dies, or until the resurrection, depending on which comes first. But he can take your soul. That's what you want to be afraid of. Don't fear him as the one who can just destroy your body. Fear the one, respect the one who could destroy your soul. And that's the question. When the bow is picked up, where are my priorities? We've seen this bow in action over the last year with a plague. A plague is like the wild beast. It's critters, where the critters came from, how the critters were engineered, lots of questions out there. But ultimately, we've got critters that have been loosed in the earth, and they are going forth, they are conquering and to conquer. Are they just an isolated thing? Or are those critters part of the whole thing? Is this just the first sign of what's about to come? Is the sword following after? Most likely. Is the famine and economic decline following? Most likely. Will these things build? Will they continue running at the same time? Most likely. And so the white horse rider, he's carrying a bow, and what we know is that what a rainbow does is it takes water and it bends it. It's like a prism, and then it separates it into the 7 colors of the rainbow. So there's a great picture right there of how the work of the white horse is accomplished. It's going to be accomplished, again, with the Holy Spirit. Remember, he says, I'm going to search Jerusalem with lamps. Well, this lamp of the Holy Spirit very easily becomes the judgment of the Holy Spirit, judging that which is true versus that which is a false witness. And so this is the perfect symbol for the white horse to come out with the rider carrying the bow. Because it does make us think of the rainbow, and that Yeshua says, as in the days of Noah, so will those days be. We look back at the days of Noah and say, okay, the earth was destroyed with a flood. What I know about Revelation is the world is being destroyed with fire judgments. And so as I see this bow, I can make the connection that this is a judgment of the Holy Spirit. And even think of the description. The first description in the creation of the Holy Spirit was of the Spirit hovering over the surface of the waters. And imagine what Noah and the ark were like. They were hovering over the surface of the waters. They were, the ark was built with pitch, the gopher wood, and then it was covered in pitch. That gopher in Hebrew, it also means a redemption price. It's the same word that we use at Yom Kippur, where we talk about coverings, talking about atonements. And so we can see the work of Messiah in both cases. The rabbis tell us that the spirit that was hovering over the waters was the spirit of Messiah. How did Noah stay afloat in a boat in such a worldwide catastrophe? Probably not by the integrity of the structure. If you can imagine the violence of not just the fountains above breaking loose, but the fountains below, when they broke loose, are said to have included the superheated ones. You see that sometimes when a volcano will explode from beneath. And what happens is it can literally make water boil. And rabbinic tradition tells us that lots of people in the flood were boiled alive because the fountains of the deep, they would have lava. They're superheated gases. And so they're coming up and just literally boiling the water. There's a heat there. Now, in a climate like that, like I said, I don't think it's the integrity of the structure. I think it's that supernatural protection of the Holy Spirit that is found in Messiah. He was that redemption price that they coated the ark with. He was the ultimate goal that we learn about when we look at Noah's Ark. And to this day, when we're reading about these seals, there's some scary things in these seals. But if we look back to the days of Noah, yes, the world was extremely wicked. But I think there's even more righteous people in the earth today that want to walk with Adonai and would not be subject to a worldwide destruction because of the plan, the divine plan that was in place in order to gather into the holy community. And so we look at those days and we say, nothing's really changed. We're going to kind of be in an ark too. We're going to be covered with the redemption price of Yeshua. We are going to hover over the surface of the waters. And you even see Messiah doing that in the Gospels. These weren't random miracles that the disciples were allowed to see. They were given specific glimpses of exact miracles to help them understand the work of Messiah. And so they see what? They see Messiah walking on the surface of the waters. He's hovering over the surface of the waters, and the waters are tempestuous, just like on the first day of creation. And they're frightened. But see, when he says peace, there's more than one example of this, by the way. Messiah being on the surface of the waters, sometimes in a boat, sometimes not. But it shows us that that same spirit of peace, we say he is our peace. The gospel is a gospel of peace. And he says, peace, be still. Well, if we read that in the Hebrew Matthew, it's not shalom, be still. It's what? Nach. Nach. In Hebrew, it's the same root as Noach. Noach in the ark, Yeshua says, Nach, be still. And this is how the word of creation, we can see that he is the master of creation. He was the one hovering over the surface of the water. He is that creative word. He is that word of peace. He is that reconciler. He is that redemption price. And so we might see the white horse. We probably won't see the white horse, but we'll see the effects of the white horse. We will see the wild beasts. We will see the plagues that come with him. And we'll understand that he is carrying a bow, and he's going out to conquer wickedness in the earth. But we don't need to be afraid of the bow, because the one who has issued the order of the bow, he is our redemption prize. He is the one who brings order from chaos. He is the one who brings rest and peace from the tempest. And so that's the boat we want to be in, because it won't really matter about the physical structure of the boat. We do our part on the physical realm, but it can never withstand the judgments of the spiritual realm. It's the faith that compels us to build a boat. It's the faith that compels us to keep a commandment. It's the faith that compels us to love our neighbors. That's how we build a boat that he can use in the tempest to preserve life. And that's what we're looking forward to, is this process of redemption in the seals.